Behind the gilded gates of European palaces, where bloodlines determine destinies and crowns cast shadows that can both elevate and destroy, lies a story that shattered centuries of royal protocol in a single, devastating decree. It is the tale of a golden prince who woke up one morning to discover that his grandmother, a queen with the power to reshape kingdoms, had decided he was no longer worthy of the title he was born to carry. What followed was not the tragic downfall one might expect, but something far more compelling. The metamorphosis of a man stripped of everything he thought defined him, only to discover who he truly was beneath the crown that was never really his to keep. But to understand the full magnitude of what befell this young prince, one must first grasp the intricate web of tensions that had been quietly weaving through the Danish royal family for years, tensions that would eventually explode in the most public and painful way imaginable. The story begins with promise and celebration. On August 28, 1999, as the world prepared to enter a new millennium, Nikolai William Alexander Frederick was born into the Danish royal family. As the eldest son of Prince Joachim and his then-wife Alexandra, Countess of Frederiksborg, young Nikolai represented the future generation of Danish royalty. His Hong Kong-born mother brought an international flair to the traditionally Nordic royal household, and their son would embody this blend of cultures from his earliest days. Yet even in these early moments of joy, the seeds of future discord were already planted. Prince Joachim, Queen Margrethe's younger son, had always lived in the shadow of his older brother, Crown Prince Frederick. While Frederick was being groomed to rule, Joachim found himself navigating the complex role of the spare, important enough to matter, but removed enough from the throne to make his position perpetually uncertain. This dynamic would later prove crucial in understanding why his children became casualties in his mother's quest for royal streamlining. The christening at Fredensborg Palace was a memorable affair. Danish chaplain in ordinary, Christian Thodberg, baptized the infant prince in the palace chapel, where a specially composed piece, Lys på din vej, by Frederik Magler, received its world premiere. The ceremony reflected the hope and anticipation surrounding this newest addition to the royal family, with the palace hosting dignitaries and family members who came to welcome Denmark's latest prince. Nikolai's childhood unfolded against the backdrop of royal privilege mixed with his parents' efforts to provide normalcy. He was described as an energetic and athletic child, excelling in sports while maintaining the friendly demeanor expected of young royalty. The divorce of his parents in 2005, when Nikolai was 6, marked his first experience with significant family change. He adapted well, dividing his time between his mother's household and his father's new life with Princess Marie, whom Prince Joachim married in 2008. As Nikolai grew into adolescence, his striking Nordic features and natural charisma made him a favorite subject for royal photographers. His education followed the path of many young European nobles, attending prestigious Copenhagen schools and eventually Copenhagen Business School. Throughout these years, he balanced academic pursuits with royal duties, representing Denmark at various official functions and learning the intricate protocols of royal life. But by the time of his graduation, Nikolai was no longer the prince who had begun those university studies. To understand the seismic events of 2022, one must examine the pattern of fractured relationships that preceded them. The Danish royal family, long admired for their seemingly harmonious public image, had been quietly wrestling with internal tensions that would eventually explode into international headlines. The first cracks appeared as early as 2019, when Prince Joachim and his family relocated to Paris for what was ostensibly a military training assignment. But behind the official explanations lay a more complex truth. "Well, I'm not going to elaborate, but it wasn't our choice," Joachim would later reveal, suggesting that the move was less about career advancement and more about royal maneuvering. The family's Paris assignment, initially described as temporary, stretched on indefinitely, a clear indication that all was not well within the royal household. Princess Marie, Joachim's second wife, found herself navigating increasingly treacherous waters. As a commoner who had married into the royal family in 2008, she had worked tirelessly to establish her place within the monarchy's rigid hierarchy. Yet whispers from palace insiders suggested that her relationship with Queen Margrethe remained complicated, particularly as the Queen began contemplating major changes to the royal structure. While Crown Prince Frederick's children, the future heirs to the throne, remained close to their grandmother in Denmark, Nikolai and his siblings found themselves increasingly removed from the center of royal power. This physical separation would later prove to be more than coincidental when the Queen made her devastating announcement. The autumn of 2022 brought unprecedented change to the Danish royal family when Queen Margrethe II made a decision that would reshape the monarchy's structure and tear apart family relationships in the most public way possible. On September 29, 2022, the palace announced that, as of January 1, 2023, Prince Joachim's descendants would no longer hold the titles of Prince and Princess, instead becoming Counts and Countess of Montpezat. The Queen's official reasoning focused on giving these young royals greater freedom to shape their own lives without the constraints that formal royal titles traditionally impose. The decision was presented as a modernization effort, intended to streamline the royal family and reduce the number of working royals. For Nikolai, then 23 and establishing his adult identity, this news represented a fundamental shift in his life's trajectory. The young prince, who had been styled His Highness Prince Nikolai of Denmark, Count of Montpezat, since 2008, would now simply be Count Nikolai of Montpezat. The change was more than cosmetic. It represented a complete reimagining of his role within the royal family and Danish society. The announcement generated considerable media attention and public debate. Many questioned the timing and necessity of such a dramatic change, particularly given that Nikolai and his siblings had conducted themselves admirably in their royal roles. The decision sparked what observers described as a very public family feud that would forever alter the dynamics of the Danish monarchy. Prince Joachim's response was swift and uncharacteristic in its directness. Breaking with royal protocol that typically demands diplomatic silence, he publicly criticized his mother's decision, stating that his children had been mistreated. This wasn't merely disagreement. This was a son calling out his mother, a prince challenging his queen, in front of the entire world. The unprecedented nature of this public criticism sent shockwaves through European royal circles, where such family disputes are traditionally handled behind palace doors. Princess Marie, finding herself in the impossible position of watching her stepchildren lose their birthright, would later reveal in interviews with the Washington Post that the family felt they had no choice but to leave Europe entirely. The decision to move to Washington, D.C. represented more than a career change. It was effectively royal exile, a dramatic severing of ties with the homeland that had defined their entire existence. The parallels to other modern royal exiles were impossible to ignore. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex had famously fled to Montecito after their own conflicts with the British royal family, but their departure was largely of their own choosing. The Danish situation was different. This was a family being pushed out, their children's identities fundamentally altered by royal decree. What made the situation particularly tragic was the timing. Just as Crown Prince Frederick's children were being elevated in preparation for their future roles, Joachim's children were being systematically diminished. The message was clear. There was only room for one branch of the family tree in the modern Danish monarchy, and it wasn't Prince Joachim's. Nikolai himself initially described feeling sad about the change, a measured response that demonstrated the composure he had learned during his years in the public eye. Rather than engaging in public controversy, he chose a path of dignity and acceptance that impressed many observers. The aftermath of Queen Margrethe's announcement played out like a modern royal tragedy. The controversy had caused such upheaval that Queen Margrethe took the extraordinary step of publicly apologizing to her son and grandchildren, but the damage was already done. In a statement shared on the royal family's official Instagram page, the monarch acknowledged, "There have been strong reactions in recent days to my decision," a remarkable admission from a queen who had rarely, if ever, been forced to explain her decisions publicly. Yet even this apology felt hollow to many observers. It acknowledged hurt feelings, but didn't reverse the decision. The titles remained stripped, the children still demoted from princes and princesses to counts and countesses. It was an apology that changed nothing, while simultaneously highlighting just how badly the situation had been handled. For Count Nikolai and his siblings, Watching their parents navigate this public humiliation while trying to maintain their own dignity became a masterclass in royal resilience under the most trying circumstances. The family's move to America represented not just a change of address, but a fundamental reimagining of their identity. They were no longer Danish royals living abroad. They were Danish counts building a new life in exile. The controversy surrounding Count Nikolai's title wasn't an isolated incident, but rather the culmination of years of strategic repositioning within the Danish monarchy. Royal experts began to recognize a pattern in Queen Margrethe's actions that suggested a deliberate, if harsh, modernization strategy that brooked no opposition from family members who didn't fit the new vision. What made the Danish case particularly striking was the complete absence of any face-saving measures. When the British royal family wanted to reduce Prince Andrew's role, they found ways to gradually diminish his prominence while allowing him to retain his titles. Queen Margrethe's approach was surgical in its precision and devastating in its completeness. There was no middle ground, no compromise, no diplomatic solution. In navigating this crisis, Count Nikolai demonstrated a maturity and grace that stood in stark contrast to the institutional brutality he had experienced. His measured public responses, his continued dedication to his studies, and his dignified handling of media attention revealed a young man who refused to be defined by what had been taken from him. The year 2024 marked a turning point in Nikolai's transformation. His graduation from Copenhagen Business School represented more than an academic achievement. It symbolized his successful navigation toward an independent identity. No longer defined primarily by his birth into royalty, he had proven his capabilities in a demanding academic program, earning his degree through merit rather than privilege. When Queen Margrethe announced her abdication in January 2024, Count Nikolai's public response demonstrated that family bonds remained intact despite institutional changes. Similarly, his continued support for his father's projects, including Prince Joachim's documentary appearances, showed that personal relationships could survive even the most challenging royal politics. Nikolai's graceful handling of losing his royal title has sparked discussions about modern monarchy, the balance between tradition and adaptation, and the personal costs of institutional change. His experience has become a case study in how young royals might navigate the evolving expectations of their roles in contemporary society.